No, my major objections are not met, and that's actually what I was pointing to during today's meeting and during our conversations, Chief of Police, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, with the committee. I might add that many of our objections mirror those of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia as well. So we understand that most of the, I think Kevin said 10,000 lines represent what we would expect in a rewrite that is more than 100 years in the making. But some of the items fall outside of contemporizing, making up that word maybe, the code. Some fall into the category of new policy proposals. And we think that new policy proposals can and should be dealt with separately from the criminal code rewrite. And I point to a couple. That's the expansion of the Second Look Act. And also the jury, what we call misdemeanor jury trials provision, which would make all misdemeanor charges eligible for jury trials. The concept we're not opposed to, but we are opposed to placing that burden on our courts, which are experiencing a vacancy crisis, and one that we locally can't change. We're already, right now, we're down 14 judges. They are already catching up on felony trials. And we don't expect that problem will go away in a year, 2 years, or 3 years. And so that will really gum up our criminal justice system, and I think it warrants more study. It warrants the courts getting involved and telling us what their capacity is to deal with something like that and to kind of forecast what it might be like in 3 or 4 years. And quite frankly, it doesn't have to move now.
Councilmember Allen, just a couple moments ago, reiterated that this would be phased in until as late as 2030. It would not be overnight or in the next year or two.
Well, I think that would just speak to my point. It doesn't have to move now. If the council thinks that it could be phased in and happen in 2030, what is the urgency of moving it right now before we have full information from the courts?
Could I follow up on that line of questioning? Have you talked to the White House or anyone in the Senate about expanding the number of judges, getting more nominees in, and trying to just clear up these vacancies? The Chief Judge has said you're correct with the vacancies that are pending right now, but they anticipate even more vacancies next year, and that gap even widening. And that, as you said, is a federal issue. It's not something that you can fix yourself. Have you talked to the White House or anybody about, one, getting more nominations in and then expanding the number of judges on the DC Superior Court?
Yes, I have done it for the last 7 years. So more than talk to them, we've met with them, we've talked to judges, we use every means possible to communicate to both the White House and to the Senate, who has the responsibility to approve the nominees.
Just I noticed one third point on your slide regarding the criminal code overhaul. You mentioned that you wanted more participants and residents advising your position. Does that mean you want the entire process slowed down and pushed to the next year, or is it just specific provisions?
We estimate, Martin, that there is little controversy over 95% of what's in the bill, and that should absolutely move forward. I think new policy proposals, like 2 of which I just mentioned, should be pulled out. I also think that where there are cases where penalties are being weakened, they warrant more discussion. And the U.S. Attorney has outlined several of them. We point to several involving gun possession or felons in possession of handguns. What's the CP? What is that? Carrying a pistol without a license, the CPWL. We think that a number of those things are weakened. And when we are fighting violent crime, we just spent an hour with council members talking about violent crime, and we don't want to see any weakening of penalties. What this code should do is it should, just like the council member said earlier, it should deal with inconsistencies. It should eliminate things that are, no longer make sense for the code. What it should definitely not do is make this community less safe. So we would recommend that the issues around weakening penalties be pulled out of what's moving forward for more discussion. Yes.
That you just made in the conversation we had before, the example of fare evasion and the council decriminalizing fare evasion, do you believe that the council is making the city less safe?
I just outlined areas in this revision, and I would point you to, and the chief or Kevin may want to add to this. There is a commission. I think that's what the council member was referring to when he says this has been debated for 16 years. And the commission made several recommendations, some of which, in total fairness, the council member rejected, to say they would make the city less safe because they were weakening penalties or weakening our focus on holding people accountable. And so that's a good thing. But the council member's proposal may be more than the commission's, but in many cases, they're less than the status quo. And that's what the U.S. Attorney focused on in his letter to the council. So it's not enough to say you didn't do what the commission wanted or you did more than the commission recommended. We also have to look to what that might mean in terms of what sentences are available right now. Yep. Oh, sorry, Chief.
Yeah, just to add to the comments that the mayor just made, when I look at this criminal code reform and everything that's in it, as the mayor mentioned, there are a lot of things that we agree on, a lot of things where, we raise issues and those things have been addressed. But as I look at this through the lens of public safety, right? When the initiative was launched to rewrite the code, I don't believe that was a directive. Hey, look at it through the lens of public safety. I'm looking at this. Does this enhance public safety? And does this whatever it is that we're changing, does it make communities safer? Does it weaken or does it strengthen what we currently have in place? And I want to be able to look at my mother and father who live in Ward 8 and say, Mom, Dad, I 100% agree that we are in the space of holding people accountable with this change that we're making. I want to be able to look at my neighbor whose house gets burglarized and say, we're absolutely holding people accountable. If somebody is robbed and a gun is put in their face, I want to be able to say that we're absolutely serious about fighting violent crime in our city. We, as the mayor mentioned, we just spent 2 hours talking about this. So while there are a lot of things that we agree on, the things that we disagree on, I think that community definitely should be informed about what those things are. And I think all council members should really understand what it is they're reading, what it is we're signing off on here. The police department is going to enforce whatever it is. But in the space where we're having violent crime in our city, we got to be able to look the residents, the visitors, the tourists, all that stuff that we talked about today. We have to be able to look those people in the face and be honest with them about where we stand right now. The issues that have been raised, and now it's time for people to consider what we're going to do next. I think that there are some changes, like, for example, as the mayor mentioned, I won't get into any specific ones, but if there is an instance right now where the status quo, and I'll just use a round number, the penalty is 10 years for how people are being sentenced for a particular crime today. If we are suggesting that we're making our city safer and that we're doing a better job, and we're saying that instead of 10 years, we're now going to give 5 years for something that we currently give 10 years for in the space of violent crime. I mean, I don't have to be a lawyer. I don't play one on TV either. But when I look at that, that does not make sense to me when we talk about making the city safer. So I think that we have to really look at this, through a plain lens, not, a bunch of, high level talk like, what is it doing? If a guy gets charged with putting a gun in somebody's face today, right outside of this library, what does the end result of that look like in terms of how that person is charged? Does whatever he's going to be charged with and the accountability piece, what the sentencing is going to look like, is that making communities safer? Well, that's going to depend on where we end up. And some of the changes that are in there right now Councilmember Allen mentioned one of the things in the space of carjacking. He did not agree with the recommendation for carjacking, and he's made changes, which I think really support the position where we are in the city, but it's beyond that. It's carjacking, it's burglary, it's robbery, it's felon in possession. It's looking at those things through a very focused lens to see, do they make the city safer or not, and how do residents feel about that?
You're coming right up to the line, but you're not saying that if it stays the way it is now, you believe the city will be less safe.
Tom, I'm saying because it hasn't been voted on at this point. And what I'm also saying is this: I think that everyone who's involved in signing off on this has to look at it through the lens that I mentioned. Now, we're saying, like, if we're reducing a sentence from 10 years down to 5 years, that makes the city less safe. Now, again, we got this, what is proposed now. We received this on Friday. How many people have actually digested what's in there at this point? That's the thing that we're looking at. So if it goes forward as is, with those adjustments that I'm raising as issues, if they haven't been adjusted, there will be implications to community members, to our city as a result of that. And I don't think that there's going to be good implications as a result of that. So my suggestion is that people know what's in there for themselves. So there should be some agreement on what we're signing off on. As the mayor mentioned, 95%, hey, everybody is good with, and that's fine. But the 5%, the devil gets in the details. I'll tell you this, Tom. I think about like buying a house, right? Yeah, you're really excited to buy a house and sign those papers until later on you realize that you didn't sign a balloon loan and interest only and all of this other kind of stuff, and that's not what you really bargained for. Do people understand? In a 10,000 line code, do people really understand what we're getting? The ANCs and the rest of the people, the regular community folks, my neighbors, my mom, my dad, do they really understand where we are right now? I appreciate the work that has been done up to this point. I was on the phone with Councilmember Allen till last night until 11:30, just really hammering out the issues, and he has made some adjustments there, and that's great, and I appreciate him in that space. But again, the 5% that we still have concern about, those are serious concerns in the space of robbery, in the space of burglary, along with the things that the mayor just mentioned, gun crimes. Like, we really need to look at that and make sure we know what we're getting.
You more, who hasn't had a chance? Martin? Oh, anybody hasn't had a chance? Oh, okay, round two.
If that 5% went through unchanged and went to a vote before the council, would you consider a veto?
That's not where we are right now, Michael. We're still working on this. And I just want to emphasize, and the chief said this earlier, is that I don't want anybody going out here and reporting the mayor is fighting the council, okay? Or the chief is blasting this. I know you might do it anyway, but you would be incorrect. This is how policy is made. This is part of the process. And we fundamentally disagree with some of the approaches here. And it's our job to let the community know what tools we need to keep DC safe. And I'm going to do that every time, whether it's having the number of officers that we need, having the courts open and not overburdened by a new set of cases that they haven't fully weighed in on, and certainly not weakening penalties on gun crimes. One of the council members just asked us, what is the penalty for illegal discharge of a weapon? One council member just asked us, you see people standing on the corner, why don't you just remove them? Well, this is kind of what we're talking about, making sure we get it right. And it's more important to get this right than to do it quickly before the session ends, especially on new policy proposals that really should be pulled out and not dealt with in this bill. Yes, Martin.
Are you at all concerned that this is going to shed some sort of concerns over the Medicaid contract that the council voted on, the process that it's going to get there? Just what residents may think when they see that a former senior official in your office took a job with a now Medicaid, a winner of a very large Medicaid.
Well, what residents should know is that we won't tolerate people that don't follow the ethics rules, even upon their exit. And we have rules that govern post-employment and what a government employee has to do regarding post-employment. And let me just say this for everybody to hear. People can go on to other jobs, but that's why we have BEGA. You can call BEGA and get advice on how you should proceed. But it is obvious, and it should be obvious to everyone, that you can't be working on one matter while at the same time entertaining an employment offer, taking an employment offer, or accepting an employment offer that's related especially to a contract that you have worked on. So my message to everyone is, I created BEGA for a lot of reasons. And one of them is to train DC government employees, and one of them is to make sure that DC government employees can get advice on how to proceed. Now, this employee was not engaged in negotiating or deciding on the contract, so I don't have any concerns with his involvement in how a contractor was selected. Yes.
Point to a specific crime that you feel that the violent crime penalty is being lessened on? You alluded to that, but I have not heard an actual specific of a crime, a violent crime, where the proposal is to lessen the penalty.
Sure, Chief.
So there are a couple ones to look at, right, Mark? And I kind of mentioned it, right? Look at burglary. Look at what the proposal is. There's back and forth on that, where we're going to land. Look at robbery, and I'll use burglary and robbery. For example, one of the requirements for burglary 1, which will be the highest grade of burglary, would require that a resident perceived that the person was inside of their home, right? Like, first, why are we shifting the burden to the resident in order to charge the highest penalty? Like you've been victimized. And while burglary 2, which is a lesser degree, does not require that you perceive that you knew that the person broke into your house. I mean, I just think putting that burden on residents, like, okay, well, if you are asleep and you don't wake up while the person is in your house, then that's a lower grade. But if you wake up and you happen to see that the person is in there, that's a higher degree of burglary. That just does not make sense to me. I've been working in this space for over 30 years. House has been broken into as a kid and as an adult, as a police official living in the District of Columbia. That is not a good feeling. And if you talk to anybody whose house has been burglarized, they will tell you that. When you look at the category of robbery specifically, and you look at the different degrees that's being added, whether it's significant injury or serious injury or no injury for robbery, most of the robberies that we see in our city don't have significant injury, right? The person might be robbed, their whatever is taken, maybe it's a robbery fear, and in other cases, a robbery gun, where a gun is put in the person's face. Like, we should not be looking through the lens of, hey, the highest penalty is necessarily where a person sustained serious or significant bodily injury. The fact that you had a gun in your face is significant to me. And I think if you talk to most residents who've been victimized of robbery, they will share the traumatic experience that they've had in that space. So again, we have to make sure that the people who are impacted by this, the people who are closest to the pain involved, that they have some awareness, some understanding of what it is we're actually doing. I mean, again, in a sterile environment, while the code is being written and people saying, hey, it's this, it's that, these kinds of things, I don't think that public safety, about how people feel, I don't think that was part of the assessment in the rewrite. And I just think, as a District of Columbia resident, a kid born and raised in this city, my parents are still here, and a lot of other loved ones here, I want to make sure that it's reviewed through that lens by everybody who's going to sign off on this, that we all understand what exactly it is we're signing up for. Some people have not had the opportunity, everybody's not really had an opportunity to thoroughly review this at this point. I mean, we just got the final bill on Friday, so we're still working through some of the things that are in there just to make sure we didn't miss anything, because there could be unintended consequences as a result of some things that get passed. And I guess, to the mayor's point, it's not just about getting things done, it's about getting it done right, and we want to make sure that we get it done right.
Okay, last round. Yes, Stephanie?
For the chief, please. Can I ask you about a more specific quality of life crime?
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, you discussed shootings earlier today,
Yeah.
but a lot of community members are talking about wheel thefts, the tire and rim. We talked to
Yeah.
one woman who had her car hit 3 times.
Yeah.
Capitol Hill neighborhood residents especially are victimized daily. There was an ANC commissioner who FOIA'd learning that there were 472 tire thefts as of October 10th compared to 161 last year. What's going on that this is able to continue the way it is? Are you
Yeah,
guys not able
so
to crack
again,
down?
just speaking to tire theft, right? Here's another space where we definitely need to be concerned. It's a concern for residents, right? Are we looking in the criminal code, for example, to see what will be associated in terms of people who are apprehended? The specific statutes you're talking about, I think they FOIA'd us and got it. What we also need to look at, there was some arrest information that was in there. It wasn't a lot of arrests, but I don't know if that was kind of a manual search where they were able to connect the arrests that have been made for theft, if they were actually able to connect them with the tire thefts. We're seeing it all in the region, quite frankly. But here specifically in DC, in neighborhoods all across the city, people will wake up in the morning and their tires are gone off their car. That would be considered a theft. Depending on how this new reform goes, we need to see in that space what a resident is paying for tires, where that is on the financial threshold, what's the accountability marker for that. So again, in that same space that you just mentioned, we need to understand how are things that are impacting people right now, how is this rewrite impacting them in this space?
What's going on that that's not able to be addressed now?
Say it again?
What's going on that that's not able to be addressed now?
So
It's been
it's
an
a-
issue for over a year.
So it's an issue where people are stealing tires off of cars all across the city. In addition to tires, they're also taking airbags, which has been an issue for a while. In addition to airbags, you got catalytic converters, which we're seeing in the region. It's a regional issue that has been going on for some time.
I really understand that issue.
Yes,
We've
ma'am.
reported on it many times.
Right.
My question is, what is going on that the police department is not able to crack down on it? Is it a matter you're not getting warrants? Is it a matter that it's not being picked up by
It's
prosecutors?
a matter of
What is
identifying the
going on?
people who are doing it. And while we are, yes, still focused on all crime, violent crime specifically, catching somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning that are pulling tires off of a vehicle. We've seen these things happen in a matter of less than maybe about a minute at most. It's a matter of capturing the people who have engaged in that activity or engaged in that unlawful behavior. And I'm also saying that in addition to that, if those people are apprehended, we need to know where it is we're going to land in terms of what the accountability measure looks like for those people. I don't know how else I hope that answers your question, Stephanie. It's an issue. Yes, it's happening. We have not arrested as many people for theft of tires as we would like to have arrested at this point. But in addition to that, make sure that we also understand how, in the grand scheme of the conversation that we're having, how does theft and the financial threshold there, how does that impact the accountability piece for community members?
All right, thank you, guys. I think we're good, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.